How does a country that is well over 90% Catholic wake up one morning to find its priests being hunted like outlaws? It sounds like a mathematical impossibility. If almost everyone belongs to the same group, how can a
Tiny little minority
bring the entire nation to its knees? Our public schools teach us all about how the Catholic Church has failed throughout history, but they rarely admit and how much Catholic persecution has been going on since the beginning of the Church. We saw it as St. Paul, then Saul, chased down the new Christians. We saw it in ancient Rome. We saw it in parts of Europe after the Protestant Reformation. We've seen it right here in the United States of America, where religious freedom is supposed to be protected by our First Amendment. But in Mexico? I mean, Mexico is so Catholic. Everywhere you turn in Mexico, you'll see an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Catholicism it's just part of the culture there. There is no way Catholic persecution reached that country. But in the 1920s, around just 100 years ago, a government run by a dictator, or Jefe Maximo, tried to end the Catholic Church in Mexico. A Freemason, President Calles, began to enforce the anti-clerical clauses already in the newly established 1917 Mexican Constitution. You see, Masons have a tendency to believe that religion slows the progress of a society. Never mind that the Catholic Church is largely responsible for funding Renaissance art and science, founded and developed both hospitals and universities, pushed social and economic reform for the dignity of the worker, and is largely responsible for the downfall of the USSR. I could go on and on, but how about instead you guys leave examples of how the church has contributed to the progress of the world in the comments? But all of that, the Masons just dismissed. I digress. Let's go back to that 1917 anti-clerical constitution. We'll take a look at what exactly it outlawed. Priests had to be Mexican-born, were deprived of any civil or political rights, and there was a limit to how many priests there could be. Religious orders were not allowed. All church buildings, seminaries, religious houses, Catholic hospitals, and charities were to be seized by the state. The church was forbidden from owning any property. Public worship could not be held outside of churches and would be under government surveillance. Catholic schools were no longer allowed, and families could not even choose to teach their children at home. No religious teaching was allowed, even privately. These laws were included in this Constitution in order to ensure the separation of church and state.
What?
The laws, however, were not enforced. The population of Mexico was widely against them and protested. Keep in mind, a 1910 census showed that 99.5% of Mexicans were Catholic. 99.5%. That kind of number made these laws very difficult to enforce. But when Calles became president in 1924, things would change. Not immediately, for the same reason the Constitution had not been enforced before. There was a hope for peace among the Catholic majority. But by the summer of 1926, it was clear that Calles was no friend of the Catholic Church. Church property was seized by the state. Priests were forbidden from wearing clerical clothing in public. Foreign priests were deported. Religious orders were no longer allowed, and Catholic schools were shut down. Catholics were angry. They had every right to be. So they decided to fight back in the same way all angry people who want mostly peaceful protest do. They boycotted. What did you think I was going to say? Their boycott was effective. It hurt the nation economically and put pressure on the regime. But instead of relenting on the unfair laws, Calles doubled down. Priests were not just being arrested now. They were being executed. The bishop announced services would be shut down. The church went underground. Viva Cristo Rey, or Long Live Christ the King, became not just a battle cry, but an execution cry as well. Lay people armed themselves. A civil war had begun. These cristeros, as they called themselves, were not trained soldiers. They were farmers, fathers, teenagers, and yes, even women smuggling in ammunition. Their biggest crime was wanting to go to Mass, to receive the sacraments, to teach their children the name of Jesus. They didn't have any real weapons. They had hunting rifles, machetes, and farming tools. The Federales, they had machine guns, artillery, and even U.S. aircraft support. Yes, the United States was supporting the Mexican government with aircraft. Seems fair? But the Cristeros were fighting for a cause. They had conviction, and by 1927, what had been scattered militia groups had turned into a full-scale army with tens of thousands of soldiers. Viva Cristo Rey! As the Cristeros gained more and more territory, the Federales got more and more desperate. They continued their arrest, tortured their captives, and executed them publicly. Martyred one by one. As the bloodshed dragged on, something unexpected was happening. The government wasn't winning. The Cristeros weren't disappearing. The priests, they were still out there in hiding, providing sacraments for the people. Peace started to sound pretty appealing to the government, and with the help of the United States ambassador to Mexico, a peace was negotiated between the Mexican government and the Vatican. The Cristeros laid down their weapons. Church bells rang once again, but the peace was uneasy and fragile. The government still hunted down Cristero leaders and executed them. The anti-clerical laws of the Constitution were not removed, some of them not even until 1992. Well over 90% of the people were Catholic in Mexico, and that still wasn't enough to protect them. Oppression isn't just about the numbers, though. It's about who has the power. The Cristero War reminds us of something uncomfortable. You don't have to be small to be silenced. You don't have to be in the minority to be persecuted. You just have to stand in the way of an ideology that wants total control. And that leaves us with a question we may one day have to face ourselves. When faith becomes inconvenient, when a belief is labeled as dangerous, when obedience to God conflicts with obedience to the state. Who do you obey? Viva Cristo Rey.